All right, gang, today we're going to talk a little bit about the cultural geography of Latin America. We've already talked about physical and political geography, the countries, you've already mapped those. We've already talked just a little bit about economic geography and the issues and sources there. Today we're going to talk about cultural geography, and that kind of falls into three divisions. One, what happened or what was here before Columbus got here and the Spanish came and they conquered everything. Two, how did the Spanish conquer and run things when they were here? And three, what is Latin America like today? So let's go ahead and talk about what we'll call the Pre-Columbian Heritage. Okay, Pre-Columbian Heritage basically means what was here before Columbus brought the Europeans to the New World. Obviously, the Europeans weren't the first people here, otherwise there wouldn't be anybody here. But the Europeans were the one that had the largest impact, at least on our culture today, as it stands. So here we go, Pre-Columbian Heritage. There were three ancient civilizations, as you can read, in Latin America, what we'll call Latin America, before Columbus, quote-unquote, discovered the New World in 1492. And the oldest of those is a group called the Mayans. The Mayans lived in Mesoamerica, or right here in the middle. Okay, if you look here, they are on the Yucatan Peninsula in Central America. They went a little bit south of the Yucatan Peninsula into the countries Belize, here, Nicaragua a little bit, Honduras as well, but they were mostly on the Yucatan Peninsula is where their civilization was centered. They built a lot of pyramids. Like a lot of ancient civilizations, they built a lot of pyramids. Here's a picture of the Mayan pyramid at Tikal, and they built that. Pyramids, for whatever reason, were a really common symbol among ancient structure, among ancient civilizations, and the Mayans were certainly no exceptions. Their civilization sort of died out and faded away in the year 900 AD, or approximately 900 AD. And we see their civilization through what they had left, their buildings, their structures. And we have a lot of things that we can see from them today left in Central America, and you can still go see the ruins today. In fact, there's really famous or bad, or however you want to phrase it, there's a horror movie called The Ruins, which are all about these kids that go and explore Central America. And they fall into the Mayan ruins and bad things happen. But it's a horror movie, bad things happen all the time. So the next empire, or the next Latin American native group that we'll talk about are the Aztecs. The Aztecs were in Mexico. Okay, they were primarily centered right here in the Sierra Madres, the high point in that plateau where the Sierra Madres come together, the Occidental and the Oriental come together. Okay, they also built pyramids. Their capital city was Tenochtitlan, which is basically today Mexico City. It's not exactly Mexico City, but it's really close to Mexico City. But they also built pyramids. Again, they're another ancient civilization that did that. There's a really good movie called Apocalypto that is about the Spanish and their interactions, or their coming interactions, with the Aztecs. And the Aztecs see their society destroyed, their way of life destroyed by the Spanish when they get here. And which brings us to the next point. The Aztec culture and civilization empire died out around 1520 or so when the Spanish conquered their ruler Montezuma II. When the Spanish came and Europeans came in general, they did some things to take over Latin America from the natives that were there. Some of it was intentional, some of it was not. One of the things that ravaged the populations of Latin America were disease. And some of that, again, was intentional and some was not. But the Spanish brought with them a lot of diseases that the natives simply weren't immune to, and so a lot died out. The third and final of the ancient civilizations are a group called the Incans. The Incans were in modern-day Peru, Chile, Ecuador, Bolivia, and high in the Andes Mountains. So they were located primarily in this area right here, high in the Andes Mountains. The Andes had a really major accomplishment. They built Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is one of the world famous landmarks, one of our global heritage sites. It's really important, really great to see an example of an excellent ancient architecture. You can see here terrace farming that they used, or terraces for cutting into the mountains. In fact, Machu Picchu remained untouched or unseen by Europeans and Westerners really until the 1920s. And there's an archaeologist from Yale, I believe, kind of the prototype for Indiana Jones, who had heard rumors about it and was the first person to go there and photograph it for National Geographic. So there you can see Machu Picchu. Like the Aztecs, they were conquered by the Spanish, and they eventually died out in the late 1500s. The Spanish were coming for gold. they conquered the Incans. So once the Spanish came and they cleaned out and they conquered the Native Americans, what did the Spanish do? Well, after Columbus got here and after the Spanish took over, Latin America was primarily colonized by the Spanish and the Portuguese. And we can see their influence really heavy today in a lot of different aspects. One of the ways that's most obvious is that we can see that Spanish is the official language in most of the area. On this map right here, every country that's dark brown, or brown rather, is Spanish is the official language, except here for Portugal, or I'm sorry, Brazil, and their official language is Portuguese. The white ones have French or English, and so they're not considered part of Latin America, but Brazil is, even though they speak Portuguese. You can also tell that they're Spanish or even Portuguese because the dominant religion is Catholicism. Catholic Christianity is the major religion of Latin America. Religion plays a major important part of their life. The Pope, currently the Pope Francis, is from Latin America. He's Argentine. And so we know that that plays a pretty important part in their life, and we know that the Catholic Church holds that as important because they elected a Latin American Catholic priest. And we see that in the cathedrals. They're all over Latin America, and a lot of the big cities are centered around large cathedrals. So how else did the Spaniards affect life? Well, when the Spanish came over, they wanted to use all this land for farms and for growing things. Well, with the native population dying, what they had to do is they had to bring over a lot of slaves, and those slaves had to work on what we'll call haciendas. Haciendas are large plantations that were owned by the Spanish, pure native, or people of pure Spanish descent from Europe. So they were the only ones allowed to own this land, and the slaves were forced to work it. The slaves from Africa were forced to work it. So their African influence is really heavy today, especially in the Caribbean. The African cultural influence is really heavy. In fact, here in the Caribbean, more slaves came to the Caribbean than any other part of Latin America as a percent of the population. And so African influence is really, really heavy. You can see the African influence in music. Basically anything with a drummer that is driven by a rhythmic drum beat has an African root to it. Calypso music, steel drum bands, and reggae are all examples of music that was driven or influenced by Africans. Okay, when the Spanish and African intermingled, that means had a child, that child was called a mulatto, someone of mixed African and European heritage. And I'll explain the significance and importance of that in a minute. But that was really important because when the Spanish brought over slaves, there's going to be some natural intermingling of people. And so what happened is the Spanish had to have a way to classify it, and I'll explain that in just a second. Well, Indian influence is particularly heavy in the continent. Okay, the Indian influence is particularly heavy here in Mexico, Central America, and really heavy in the Amazon and South America as well. The influence is not as much African as it is Indian or Native American, and it's especially seen in what we'll just call traditional dances and celebrations and festivals are also seen here. Europeans, when the Europeans and the Indians mixed, their child was called a Mestizo. So here's why all of this is important. Because of the interminglings of people, the Spanish did not want to lose control. They wanted to make sure that they retained control and that they had control in Latin America. And so here's what the Spanish did. They said, all right, only the people who are of pure Latin American heritage can own land, can run government, and can be in charge. Okay, that's basically it. So they had to classify everybody based on race, and it was a really simple classification system because they had to maintain control. People who were from Europe were the minority, so they had a minority of people who had to keep control of the majority. Below the Europeans, people from Europe were people who were of European descent, who were born here in the Americas. Those were often called Creoles. And then below them, you had mulattoes. Then below them, you would have mestizos, and then slaves. And at the very bottom, you had the natives. And you had to keep, or they kept this class structure so that they did not lose control, and that was very important. So culture today in Latin America is a little bit different. Today, most Latin Americans or South Americans live along the coast. You can see that here. In fact, there are a couple of what we'll call megacities that are in Latin America. Many of the cities that are in Latin America are called megacities. A megacity is any city where there are 10 million or more people. Those are huge cities. Sao Paulo, Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, Mexico City are all, and I believe Buenos Aires, but I'm not positive, are all mega cities. These are cities with over 10 million people in them. Okay? People are moving to those cities because they're, as we talked about with economics, they're losing their land, and so they're going to the cities to find economic opportunity. That's what cities represent to a lot of people. So poor people, often when they move to these cities, set up what we'll call shanty towns. Shanty towns are parts of cities that are very poor, and people build whatever kind of structure they can to live. Now here we see a shanty town built on a hillside, and it looks like the houses are literally stacked on top of one another. And often these are just, people are just moving on the land, they're not buying or purchasing it, and they're just moving in and doing what's called squatting. There's a song by Desmond Decker, which we're not going to listen to right now. It's a reggae song called Shantytown, and in it he talks about being poor and having to find a way to make a living. But we're going to skip that today, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at some other things. But shantytowns are poor settlements, poor parts of cities that are often on the edges of cities where the poor people live and set up life in hopes of better economic opportunities. Okay, and we'll skip that. Oh, there's a little review of the countries. All right, Latin America has seen a lot of population growth, and so a lot of their population is under the age of 15. Latin America also has one of the highest standards of living in a lot of places, despite they're often very poor. They often have, I wouldn't say standard of living, but a quality of life is pretty high. Latin Americans have also experienced a lot of immigration because there's not a lot of opportunity there to make money. And so what happens is a lot of people will make money, get educated, and then they'll move out. Sometimes people moving out will create what's called a brain drain. What that means is that those that are well educated move to America, or North America rather, United States. They move to Europe, places where they can find economic opportunity, and so those that are left often are not as well educated and therefore not maybe as suitable to run economics and to run countries, and that often leaves many countries, especially Central America and those landlocked countries, behind economically. So we can see that urban growth is really rapid in Latin America. In particular, Sao Paulo has grown a lot in recent years. Here we can see a couple of mega cities. Lima, Peru, Buenos Aires Lima, Peru is not a mega city. Buenos Aires and Sao Paulo are all mega cities that have grown really rapidly in recent years. And here we see causes of population growth. Its economy has opened up. They're doing a lot more economically. People are moving to urban areas. And the effects of their population growth, in order to sustain that, farmers have slashed and burned farms, the Amazon to grow food. Large cities are having trouble keeping up. And so there are a lot of good things with population growth, but there's also a lot of bad things. And one of the bad things is that urban sprawl, the growing population of the country. All right? So that's where we'll end it today, and I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you later. Again, that's Culture in a Latin